black swan every second. The reality though now is that given all the different ways that people are using technology, there are so many, and then the personalization associated with it, there are edge effects everywhere. And if you've got millions, if you've got thousands of users or millions of users, those edge effects are actually everywhere. And very often when we talk about making organizations more efficient, we talk about shaving 1% or 0.1% or 0.01% off of a process, and you think, well, that's great, I've saved a small, tiny fraction of a large number of processes. But the reality is that when things go wrong, that's the time to actually get really big improvements, both in terms of customer experience or in terms of the efficiency of how things operate. So if you have something that goes wrong, it totally messes up many different processes and many different systems. And I'm trying to think of an example I can share, but think of any large organization where customer interaction, that moment of truth, is really important. If you mess it up, you wind up with a bad customer experience, and you wind up churning sales or losing customers.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the example, and I'm sorry to everyone out there. There was a big automation project that took place with Woolworths last year in Australia, and it was something that as a project was all about making people more effective and more efficient in terms of a pick activity. So people were picking things and packaging. And that worked really well as a project. Scaled up to a whole store, and it made the store more effective. Scaled up to the entire enterprise of Woolworths, and there were things that started to go really wrong, where people who were otherwise enthusiastically engaged in this whole project suddenly had a bad experience. In this case, it was employees having a bad experience.
Yeah.
And those anomalies, those negative interactions, those negative employee experiences weren't fed back into the system. And as a consequence, there were, of course, a lot of consequences, but the Woolworths had a 17-day strike, arguably had a revenue impact of more than $50 million, and their major competitors really won at the expense of Woolworths. So what I mean in that case is that, in this case, it's not a customer, it's people inside the organization who had a really bad reaction to a highly automated process because those anomalous bad experiences weren't identified quickly and weren't actually fed back into the overall rollout of that process. So winding back to my original point, needle in a haystack is a good analogy for thinking about cybersecurity and incursions and being able to deal with that. Something's not right. But if you try to introduce a large-scale enterprise level or whole of organization level process, and you're not picking up those anomalies, you're not picking up those bad signals, and you're not doing something about it, things can go wrong really quickly.
Yeah, and I don't think we always think about the unintended consequences on the human side and the cultural side to this, and I think that's